Good day, everyone. Welcome. My name is Loreto Atamosa, your instructor for JED 6 with the description, The Contemporary World. For today's video discussion, we are going to talk about the lesson 7 of our course, which is all about media and globalization. And so let's begin. In this lesson, we will understand the relationship between media and globalization, particularly on how media help and affects the process of globalization. Furthermore, we will deepen our understanding on the effects of media in the Orient and the Western world, as well as to see how media create a global village in the process of imperialism. And at the end of this video discussion, everyone is expected to analyze how various media drive different forms of global integration, to compare the social impacts of different media on the processes of globalization, and to explain the dynamic between local and global cultural production, and to define the responsible media consumption. And so, globalization entails the spread of various cultures. When a film is made in Hollywood, it is shown not only in the United States, but also in other cities across the globe. South Korean rapper Psy's song Gangnam Style may have been about a wealthy suburb in Seoul, but its listeners included millions who have never been or may never go to Gangnam. Some of them may not even know what Gangnam is. So globalization also involves the spread of ideas. For example, the notion of the rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, or the LGBT communities is spreading across the world and becoming more widely accepted. And so people who travel the globe teaching and preaching their beliefs in universities, churches, public forums, classrooms, or even as guests of a family play a major role in the spread of culture and ideas. But today, television programs, social media groups, books, movies, magazines, and the like have made it easier for advocates to reach larger audiences. Globalization relies on media as its main conduit for the spread of global culture and ideas. Jack Lowell was then right to ask, could global trade have evolved without a flow of information on markets, prices, commodities, and more? Could empires have stretched across the world without communication throughout their borders? Could religion, music, poetry, film, fiction, cuisine, and fashion develop as they have without the intermingling of media and cultures? There is an intimate relationship between globalization and media which must be unraveled to further understand the contemporary world. Lowell described media as a mean of conveying something, such as a channel of communication. Technically speaking, a person's voice is a medium. However, when commentators refer to media, which is the plural of medium, they mean the technologies of mass communication. Print media include books, magazines, and newspapers. Broadcast media involve radio, film, and television. Finally, digital media cover the internet and mobile mass communication. And within the category of internet media, there are the email, internet sites, social media, and internet-based video and audio. Alrighty, and to further understand the idea of media and globalization, here is a video presentation made by Twish. Here, let's watch this.
Hi! Have you ever wondered how we came up to this, and many more of this? So, hi! Any ideas what our topic today would be? As you can see, the world today has already its transition from traditional to digital when talking about media. I would assume that you guys already knew what media is. You know it, right? Media that involves communication channels through which news, entertainment, education, data, or promotions are disseminated. Yes, that media. Okay. Anyways, I am here to tackle about these things with you today. Our first topic will be the evolution of media and globalization. Scholars like Harold Innis, James Lull, Terry Rantanin have found it logical to organize the historical study of media by time period, since each stage is characterized by a dominant medium. These are the time periods that scholars organized. We have the oral communication, script, the printing press, electronic media, and lastly, digital media. In 1950s, Harold Innis divided media into three periods, namely oral, print, and electronics. Later then followed by James Lowe at the close of 20th century adding digital. And lastly, in 2005, Terhi and Tanin added script before the printing press. Oral communication is known to be the oldest and enduring of all media. Despite numerous changes, the first and last thing that humans could share is the ability to speak. Speech has been with us for at least 200,000 years. When speech developed into language, it has become a medium that aids globalization. But how? Language helps humans to move and allow them to cooperate, such as sharing information that would help the human's ability to travel and adopt various environment, like the land, water, and climate. Also sharing information about tools and weapons that led to the spread of technology. Language helps humans to settle down. It has transmitted information across generations, leading into the creation of villages and towns. It also led to markets, trades, and giving rise to cities. According to Osler, language was their most important tool. Script, the very first writing, allowed humans to communicate and share knowledge or ideas over much larger spaces and across longer times. Language was essential but imperfect. Distance is a hindrance. Time also caused difficulties and relies on human memory, which is hard because it has limited capacity, hence writing. Early writing system began to appear after 3000 BCE. Writing has also its evolution, from cave paintings, petroglyphs, and hieroglyphs, until it led to the creation of alphabets. However, script is about writing, so it needed to be written on something, right? Writing was first done as carvings in wood, clay, stones, bones, and many more. Ancient Egypt created the most popular paper from a plant named papyrus. With these writing surfaces, humans had a medium that propelled globalization. Script allowed a permanent codification of economic, cultural, religious, and political practice, and were spread over large distances and handed down through time. The printing press. It is said that it transformed markets, businesses, nations, schools, churches, governments, and many more. It also started the information revolution. Before it emerged, the production of written documents was slow and expensive. With the birth of printing press, reading materials was surprisingly made cheaper and easily spread to everyone. This includes books, pamphlets, flyers. In 1979, historian Elizabeth Eisenstein investigated the influence of the printing press, ranging from the Enlightenment, Protestant Reformation, the Scientific Revolution, and many more. First consequence was the changes of printing press to the very nature of knowledge. It preserved and standardized knowledge. Second is that the printing press encouraged the challenge of political and religious authority, for it is able to circulate different views. Electronic media. A host of new media is uprising the system of globalization in the beginning of 19th century. These are the telegraph, telephone, radio, and television. All mentioned were the medium of electronic media. From the word itself, it requires electricity. The telegraph became a global medium for it eventually sent coded messages. Telephone, with its ability to transmit speed over distance, became the next communication breakthrough. Radio, the wireless telegraph that transmitted music and news, reaching regions without the construction of wires and roads. Television is considered the most powerful, brought together visual and the power of film with radio. Largely because of televisions, the world became a global village. Digital media. It has taken over our daily lives. The computer is the common representation of digital media. Anyone with computer has access to economic information. It also allows industry to access to a global marketplace. The social media allows citizens to communicate among themselves and adopt new practices and culture such as music, education, fashion, arts, and many more. As you can see, media made globalization possible. With the periods of media and globalization, we saw marked influence of media on globalization. It is beyond impossible to think that globalization is emerging without the influence of media. Now that we're done with our first topic, let's proceed to the global imaginary and global village. Global imaginary, as coined by Manfred Steger, refers to consciousness of belonging to a global community that has emerged with the rapid rise of communication technologies. In 1991, political scientist Benedict Anderson wondered how a group of people, despite the vast expanse of land, has conceived themselves as a nation. These nations are said to be results of global imaginary. In 1996, Arjun Appadurai added, "The imagination referred to the global imaginary is not a fantasy but a social fact." We learned that largely because of television, Marshall McLuhan proclaimed the world as a global village. So what is a global village? In 1964, Marshall McLuhan coined the term global village. It describes the phenomenon of worlds shrinking and expanding at the same time due to the technological advances that allow sharing of culture. Drawn closely by media, people would be like neighbors. In 1970, Louis Mumford, one of Marshall McLuhan's critics, found hope in media for a village-like world of harmony and grace, but was dismayed as it was used for power, capitalism, militarism, profit, and more. Media and economic globalization. The media, today is one of the largest industries in the world, plays a huge role in the process of economic globalization. It creates global capitalism and promotes conceptual foundation of the global market economy. Media has a remarkable economic influences from commercial on radio and television, product advertised in films, digital billboards, pop-up ads, and magazines. Media scholar Robert McChesney states that economic and cultural globalization would be impossible without a global commercial media system to promote global markets. Oligopoly, a market structure with a small number of firms, none of which can keep the other from having significant influence. The media oligopoly is not interested in the ideology of global village. It is only interested in one thing: profit. No news today. In this view, transnational conglomerates are much less interested than local media outlets in providing news and information necessary for netizens. People are encouraged to think of products, not politics, as consumers, not citizens. And that's a wrap. I hope it helped you in understanding media and globalization. So that would be all. Be safe and bye!
Alrighty, that is amazing video discussion, right? And so, McLuhan uses analysis of technology to examine the impact of electronic media. Since he was writing around the 1960s, he mainly analyzed the social changes brought about by television. McLuhan declared that television was turning the world into a global village. By this, he meant that as more and more people sat down in front of the television sets and listened to the same stories, their perception of the world would contract. If tribal villages once sat in front of fires to listen to collective stories, the members of the new global village would sit in front of bright boxes in their living rooms. In 1976, media critic Herbert Schiller argued that not only was the world being Americanized, but that this process also led to the spread of American capitalist values like consumerism. Similarly, for John Tomlinson, cultural globalization is simply a euphemism for Western cultural imperialism, since it promotes homogenized, westernized consumer culture. And so, these scholars who decry cultural imperialism, however, have a top-down view of the media, since they are more concerned with the broad structures that determine media content. Moreover, their focus on America has led them to neglect other global flows on information that the media can enable. This media or cultural imperialism theory has therefore been subject to significant critique. Now let's proceed with critics of cultural imperialism. The proponents of the idea of cultural imperialism ignore the fact that media messages are not just made by producers, they are also consumed by audiences. In the 1980s, media scholars began to pay attention to the ways in which audiences understood and interpreted media messages. The field of audience studies emphasizes that the media consumers are active participants in the meaning-making process who view media text. In media studies, a text simply refers to the content of any medium through their own cultural lenses. In 1985, Indonesian cultural critic Ayin Ang studied the ways in which different viewers in the Netherlands experience watching the American soap opera Dallas. In the 1990s, Eliho Katz and Tamar Lewis decided to push Ang's analysis further by examining how viewers from distinct cultural communities interpreted Dallas. They argued that the texts are received differently by varied interpretative communities because they derive different meanings and pleasures from this text. Apart from the challenge of audience studies, the cultural imperialism thesis has been belied by the renewed strength of regional trends in the globalization process. Asian culture, for example, has proliferated worldwide through globalization of media. Japanese brands from Hello Kitty to the Mario Brothers to Pokemon are now an indelible part of global popular culture. The same can be said for Korean pop or K-pop and Korean telenovelas, which are widely successful regionally and globally. The observation even applied to culinary taste. The most obvious case of globalized Asian cuisine is sushi. And while it is true that McDonald's has continued to spread across Asia, it is also the case that Asian brands have provided stiff competition. The Philippines' Jollibee claims to be #1 choice for fast food in Brunei. Given these patterns, it is no longer tenable to insist that globalization is an directional process foreign cultures overwhelming local ones. Globalization, as noted in Lesson 1, will remain an uneven process and it will produce inequalities. Nevertheless, it leaves room for dynamism and cultural change. This is not a contradiction, it is merely a testament to the phenomenon's complexity. And now let's proceed with social media and the creation of cyber ghettos. By now, very few media scholars argue that the world is becoming culturally homogeneous. Apart from the nature of diverse audiences and regional trends in cultural production, the internet and social media are proving that the globalization of culture and ideas can move in different directions. While Western culture remains powerful and media production is still controlled by a handful of powerful Western corporations, the internet, particularly the social media, is challenging previous ideas about media and globalization. As with all new media, social media have both beneficial and negative effects. On the one hand, these forms of communication have democratized access. Anyone with an internet connection or a smartphone can use Facebook and Twitter for free. These media have enabled users to be consumers and producers of information simultaneously. The democratic potential of social media was most evident in 2011 during the wave of uprising known as the Arab Spring. Without access to traditional broadcast media like TV, activists opposing authoritarian regime in Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya used Twitter to organize and disseminate information. Their efforts toppled their respective governments. More recently, the Women's March against newly installed US President Donald Trump began with a tweet from Hawaii lawyer and became a national, even global movement. However, in social media also have their dark side in the early 2000s. Commentators began referring to the emergence of a splinternet and the phenomenon of cyber balkanization to refer to the various bubbles people place themselves in when they are online, including the creation of cyber ghettos. You see, ghettos are not good. Whether they are at the local, state, or national level, they tend to breed unrest, dysfunction, and crime that can extend well beyond their borders, undermining the health of an entire society. And the high-tech version of that should worry the world IT community, according to Alan Friedman, a fellow and research director at the Brookings Institution Center for Technology and Innovation. Friedman warns in his research paper that a lack of coordination and cooperation regarding cybersecurity among nation-states could create cybersecurity ghettos and undermine the security of a global cyber environment. So as consumers of media, users must remain vigilant and learn how to distinguish fact from falsehood in a global media landscape that allows politicians to peddle what President Trump's senior advisors now call alternative facts. Though people must remain critical of mainstream media and traditional journalism that may also operate based on vested interest, we must also insist that some sources are more credible than others. A newspaper story that is written by a professional journalist and vetted by professional editors is still likely to be more credible than a viral video produced by someone in his or her bedroom. Even if both will have their biases, people must be able to tell the difference. Alrighty, and to wrap up our discussion, this video discussion gives you the idea that different media have diverse effects on globalization processes. At one point, it seemed that global television was creating a global monoculture. Now, it seems more likely that social media will splinter cultures and ideas into bubbles of people who do not interact. Societies can never be prepared for the rapid changes in the systems of communications. So every technological change, after all, creates multiple unintended consequences. So consumers and users of media will have a hard time turning back the clock. Though people may individually try to keep out of Facebook or Twitter, for example, these media will continue to endanger social changes. Instead of fearing these changes or entering a state of moral panic, everyone must collectively discover ways of dealing with them responsibly and ethically. Again, my name is Loreto Atamosa. Thank you for watching and see you in my next video. Goodbye!